Our groundskeeper grabbed my arm when I was halfway down the main staircase, and I nearly dropped the pearl earring I was still trying to fasten. Mrs. Lillian. Amos kept his voice low, urgent, nothing like the steady, slow drawl he normally used when he needed something fixed or ordered. Don't go back upstairs. Come with me. Amos, what on earth? Please. His eyes said the rest. In 18 years, through everything this family had been through, Amos had never looked at me the way he did right then. Not when the basement flooded the winter Percy was in the hospital. Not at the funeral. Not when I called him at 2 in the morning, 6 months after Percy died, because a pipe burst and I didn't know who else to call. He looked frightened. There are guests arriving in 2 hours, I said. Grant's party. I know. He stepped closer. That's exactly why we have to go now, before it's too late. I want to be upfront with you before we go any further. This story contains some elements shaped for storytelling purposes, but the emotions in it are real, and I believe you need to hear it. Thank you for being here. If this story moves you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me where you're listening from right now. I want to know you're with me. The party had been Grant's idea, not the wedding he'd be planning in the spring. My daughter-in-law-to-be had already made clear she wanted something small for that, but the engagement announcement dinner, 30 of our closest family friends, business partners, people who'd known my son since he was knee-high in Percy's hardware store, helping himself to granola bars off the workbench. Grant had been so excited planning it. He'd even come over early one Saturday to help me pick out the tablecloths. My son was 34 years old, kind-hearted in the way his father had been, and he had been lonely for a long time. After Percy passed, we both had been 2 years of grief that sat in the house like furniture that no longer fit. And then Grant had come home one evening glowing in a way I hadn't seen since before the illness, and he'd said, "Mom, I met someone." Her name was Paige. She was 31, taught 2nd grade across town, volunteered at a literacy program on weekends. She had warm brown eyes and a laugh that came easy, and a way of touching Grant's arm when she talked to him that made him look like a man who'd finally found solid ground. She said all the right things at every family dinner, every holiday, every Sunday afternoon she spent in our home. But something had always sat wrong in my stomach when she left. I couldn't name it. I'd tried. Percy always said I had good instincts and worse timing for listening to them. He wasn't wrong. I told myself it was just old-fashioned mother worry. I told myself I was projecting. Grant was happy. Genuinely happy for the first time in 2 years, and that had to matter more than some nameless unease I couldn't put into words. I was wrong about that. "Amos," I said at the bottom of the stairs, "tell me what this is about." His jaw tightened. "I'll tell you in the car. We need to leave right now, before she gets here." I looked at the front hallway. The house behind me smelled like the caterer's work. Garlic and rosemary, and something sweet from the dessert trays. The tables were set. The good china was out. Percy's good china, the set we'd used at every celebration for 31 years of marriage. "How long have you known?" I asked. He closed his eyes for just a second. "Long enough that I'm ashamed I waited. I needed to be certain before I brought it to you." I reached for my purse. "Show me." Amos drove like a man who knew exactly where he was going, because he'd been there before. I sat in the passenger seat of his truck and watched familiar neighborhoods slide past the window. The old Methodist church on Clement, the park where Grant learned to ride his bike, the corner where Percy proposed 40 years ago. And I let Amos drive without asking questions. He pulled up to a 2-story apartment complex on Keswick Street. Beige stucco, 2nd-floor balconies, a row of cars in the lot. Ordinary. Nothing about it suggested it was the place where my son's life was being quietly disassembled. "Apartment 2C, Amos said. She comes here Tuesdays and Thursdays when she tells Grant she's at her book club." I stared at the building. How do you know this? I followed her, he said it simply, without apology. 3 weeks ago, I was working on the side garden, and I overheard something on her phone. She didn't know I was there. What she said, I couldn't unhear it, so I followed her. Twice. What did you overhear? He looked at me steadily. I think it's better if you see for yourself. There's a hallway window on the second floor that looks into the apartment. She's up there now. She told Grant she was running errands, said she'd come straight to the party. We have maybe 40 minutes. I got out of the truck. The stairwell smelled like laundry detergent and someone's dinner. My heels were wrong for this. I'd been dressed for a party, but I climbed anyway. Second floor. Left turn. The window in the hallway overlooked the interior courtyard, and from the right angle, you could see straight through the sliding glass door of 2C. Before I tell you what I saw through that window, I need you to do something for me. Type, "I'm ready," in the comments right now. I need to know you're still with me before I keep going. Paige was inside. Not the Paige who sat at my dinner table and asked thoughtful questions about Percy's business. Not the woman who'd held Grant's hand at the cemetery on the first anniversary of his father's death and cried what I had believed were real tears. This Paige moved through that apartment like someone at home. She was in jeans and a loose sweater, hair pulled back, laughing at something. A man sat at the kitchen counter, late 30s, dark-haired, worn down in the particular way of someone who hasn't slept soundly in a long time. He was watching her the way people watch someone they know all the way through. Not new love, old love, lived-in love. Then a little girl came running from the hallway. She was small, maybe 4 years old, blonde curls, still in her pajamas even though it was the afternoon. She crashed into Paige's legs and wrapped her arms around them. "Mommy, can we have mac and cheese?" I pressed my hand flat against the wall. Paige bent down, kissed the top of the little girl's head. "After Mommy leaves, okay?" asked Daddy. The man, Daddy, said something I couldn't hear clearly. Paige shook her head, her expression shifting into something harder. I watched the warmth drain from her face the way color drains from a room when the sun moves. Something calculating took its place, something that had been sitting just beneath the surface the whole time. And I understood with a cold, settling clarity that I had seen this face before. I had seen it in my own kitchen and simply hadn't recognized it for what it was. I pulled back from the window. "Her name is Lucy," Amos said quietly. "She's 4 years old. That man is Troy Maddox. He and Paige have been legally married for 3 years. The hallway tilted slightly. I put my back against the wall. 3 years, I said. "Yes, ma'am." Grant had been with her for 18 months. I took 3 slow breaths. Percy's voice in my head, the thing he used to say before a hard decision when everything felt like it was sliding. "Get your feet under you, Lil. You can fall apart later." "I'm going in," I said. Amos started, Mrs. Lillian. "I need to speak with him." I nodded toward the apartment. "Not through a window. I need to hear it from a person." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll be right here." Troy answered the door, looking like a man who hadn't fully slept in months. He studied me with polite wariness, the look of someone who senses something is wrong before they know what it is. "Can I help you?" "My name is Lillian Pruitt. I'm Grant Pruitt's mother." Every bit of color left his face at once. From somewhere behind him, Paige's voice, "Troy, who is it?" He didn't answer her. He stepped back and let me in. She came around the corner and stopped so suddenly, it looked like she'd walked into something invisible. For one unguarded second, her face showed me everything. Calculation, fear, the rapid silent reorganizing of someone caught mid-step. Then the mask came down, smooth and practiced. "Mrs. Pruitt," her voice was careful, "you shouldn't be here." "Mommy!" Lucy came running in from the hallway, clutching a stuffed rabbit, and stopped when she saw a stranger. She pressed herself against Paige's leg and peered up at me with serious eyes. The sight of her, This child with her blonde curls and her stuffed rabbit, completely unaware of what her mother had built and what it was about to cost everyone, nearly cracked something open in my chest. I looked at Troy and said simply, "Tell me." He sat down at the kitchen counter like his legs had made the decision for him. He rubbed both hands over his face. Paige said his name in a low, warning tone. He looked at her for a long moment, a look that carried years of shared history in it, and then he looked at me. "We've been married 3 years," he said. "Lucy came premature. The medical bills were more than we could manage, and then I made some bad investments trying to climb out, and we ended up owing money to a man named Donovan. He doesn't lend money the way banks do." He paused. "He's been threatening us for over a year." "And Paige's solution," I said quietly, "was my son." He closed his eyes. "She researched your family, the hardware business, your properties, everything your husband built. She found out about the children's hospital auction grant attended, and she made sure she was there." He swallowed hard. "She said if she could marry him and access the joint finances, she could pay Donovan off, and we could disappear somewhere he'd never find us. She said it would take a year, maybe less." Paige's voice rose, hard and fast. "I was protecting my daughter. You don't understand what Donovan threatened to do." "I understand," I said. And in some carefully walled-off part of me, I did understand the terror of a mother trying to keep her child safe. But understanding something is not the same as excusing it. "You researched my husband's estate while his grave was still new," I said. "You studied what my son grieved and what he needed, and you built yourself into the exact shape of it. You made him believe he was loved." My voice didn't shake. Percy would have been proud of that. "That is not protecting your daughter. That is burning another family to the ground to keep your own house warm." The room was quiet except for Lucy, who had wandered back into the hallway and was explaining something to her stuffed rabbit in a soft, serious voice. "I need everything you have," I said to Troy. "Marriage certificate, photographs, anything in writing." He nodded. He got up and came back 5 minutes later with a manila envelope. His hands were shaking when he handed it to me, but he handed it to me. Amos and I were back at the house by 6:15. The caterer was finishing the last of the appetizers. The first guests were due at 7. Grant was upstairs getting dressed, and when I passed his door, I could hear him humming. Just humming to himself, happy, not a care in the world. And I had to stand in the hallway for a moment with one hand flat against the wall before I could make my legs keep going. I went to Percy's study, closed the door, and spread the contents of the envelope across his desk. Marriage certificate, Paige Elise Corrigan and Troy Allen Maddox, married 3 years ago in Fulton County. Photographs spanning that time. A hospital room, the day Lucy was born, Christmas mornings, birthday candles. A complete documented life that my son knew nothing about. And then the printed text messages. Amos had screenshot them carefully on both visits, and reading them now I understood why he'd looked so frightened on the staircase. "Grant is careful but not suspicious," she'd written. 6 months, maybe 8. And 2 months after that, the announcement dinner is the right moment. Once he does it publicly, in front of everyone who matters to his family, he won't want to walk it back. She had chosen tonight deliberately. She had calculated that Grant's pride, and his love for me, and his need not to humiliate the people in that dining room would make him less likely to listen to doubt afterward. She had studied my son the way you study a lock before you pick it. My phone buzzed. "Amos, Donovan is in the parking lot down the block. Came to make sure the plan is going forward. I've made a call. Give me 20 minutes. I typed back, "Understood." Then I went upstairs to check on my son. Grant stood at the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie with the focused expression Percy used to get before important meetings, brow slightly furrowed, jaw set, trying to look more confident than he felt. "Mom," he smiled when he saw me, relieved and warm. "Good. Does this tie work? I've changed it twice." "It works." He turned back to the mirror. I stood in the doorway and looked at him. My boy. 34 years old and still showing me, whenever he thought I wasn't watching, the 10-year-old who used to sit on Percy's workbench on Saturday mornings eating his granola bar and asking questions about everything in the world. I'm nervous, he said. Is that silly? It's just a dinner party. It's not just a dinner party to you. He laughed quietly. No, it's not. He met my eyes in the mirror. I love her, Mom. I know you've had your reservation. I've seen it. You don't hide things as well as you think. He smiled to soften it. But she's real. She made me feel like I could come back from losing Dad. Like the world wasn't just going to be grief forever. He paused. He would have liked her. I held his gaze in the mirror for a beat too long, and he caught it. Mom, are you okay? I love you, I said. Whatever happens tonight, I need you to know that. And I need you to know that everything I do, because I cannot love you and let you walk into a lie at the same time. He turned around slowly. What does that mean? It means go downstairs and be the gracious host you were raised to be. I'll explain when the time is right. I promise you. He searched my face. He didn't look reassured, but he nodded, because he trusted me, and that trust settled in my chest like something both precious and almost unbearable. By 7:30, the house was full. Voices and laughter and the clink of glasses and people who had watched Grant grow up, who had come to Percy's funeral and brought food for weeks and called to check in on us long after most people stopped calling. Good people. People who deserved not to be standing witnesses to what was about to happen in that dining room. Paige arrived at 7:10 in a deep blue dress, poised and radiant. She kissed Grant's cheek. She greeted guests by name, asked after their families, laughed at the right moments in every conversation. I watched her work that room and understood for the first time exactly how long and how carefully she had practiced this. Her eyes found mine once across the room. Something passed through them. A calculation, quickly resolved. Then she turned back to my son and smiled. At 7:55, Grant tapped his glass. Before dinner, he said, voice warm and slightly unsteady, I want to take a moment. Because the woman standing next to me. He looked at Paige with everything right there on his face, all of it, 2 years of hope, has given me something back that I thought I'd lost for good. And I wanted the people who matter most to us to be the first to. I stood up. The scrape of the chair against the floor was louder than I expected. Every head in the room turned at once. Mom, Grant's voice went careful. I'm sorry. I kept my voice steady and clear. I'm so sorry to everyone here, but there is something that has to be said before this goes one step further. 30 people, all of them watching me. I didn't look at Paige. I looked at my son. Grant, the woman you're about to announce your engagement to is already married. The silence that followed was absolute. And then it wasn't. The room erupted. Gasps, confused voices, the scrape of chairs. Grant's face moved through 5 expressions in 3 seconds. Disbelief, confusion, a desperate reaching look that I will carry for the rest of my life. Mom, his voice had gone very quiet. What are you saying? Her legal name is Paige Maddox. She and Troy Maddox have been married for 3 years. They have a daughter together. Her name is Lucy. She is 4 years old. Paige's composure broke. That is not. Grant, don't listen to her. She has never accepted me. She has been looking for a reason since the beginning. I have the marriage certificate, I said. Photographs. Text messages that describe in her own words exactly what this relationship was designed to accomplish. Grant turned to Paige. He took 1 step back. His voice was very controlled in the way voices get, when a person is holding themselves together with the thinnest thread. Tell me she's wrong. Grant. Paige. He said her name like a man reaching for the last solid thing. Please, tell me she's wrong. She opened her mouth. The front door opened. Amos stepped into the entryway. Behind him stood Troy Maddox, and beside Troy, holding his hand, was Lucy. She was in a pink cardigan and her hair had been brushed. She looked around the crowded dining room with the wide-eyed wonder of a child who finds the whole world interesting. Then she saw Paige across the room in her blue dress. Her whole face lit up all at once. "Mommy!" She started forward, pulling against Troy's hand, reaching. "Mommy, you look so pretty!" There are moments that change rooms forever. Every person in that dining room went completely still. The kind of stillness that means everyone has understood at exactly the same instant. Paige's face had gone to ash. Grant stood absolutely still. I watched something close in his expression, watched the open, hoping, tender thing he'd allowed himself to become over 18 months go very quiet inside him. It was the worst thing I have ever seen on my son's face, and I pray I never see anything like it again. "Get out." 2 words, flat and final. "Grant, please. The debt, Donovan, Lucy. You don't understand how desperate we were. I understand that every time you said you loved me, it was a performance." His voice was steady. "I still don't know where he found that. I understand that you chose me the way you'd choose an instrument. Something useful." He turned to face the room. All these people, these witnesses, and I saw what it cost him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you're all here for this." 2 of our guests, I found out later, had already quietly called the police. Amos had called ahead an hour before the party. The officers arrived quickly and professionally, and there was a particular bleak precision to watching Paige leave my home in handcuffs, with her blue dress trailing behind her down the front steps. Troy had brought his own folder. He'd called a legal aid attorney 2 hours before arriving. Donovan was picked up in the parking lot 2 blocks away, trying to leave when the police cars appeared. Lucy sat on the entry hall bench with Amos kneeling in front of her, showing her something on his phone. A photograph of a dog, I think, while the adults around her quietly managed what was left of the evening. She had no idea. She was telling Amos that dogs were better than cats, because dogs were friendlier and also more fun at the park. I sat beside Grant on the back porch while the last guests filtered out. The night was warm and still. The party lights were still strung across the yard and still burning, which felt both very wrong and very human at the same time. He didn't speak for a long while. "Did she ever actually love me?" he asked finally. "Even once, or was the whole thing a script from the beginning?" I answered honestly, "I don't know. I don't think she knows anymore either." "I feel so stupid." "She researched your grief and built herself into the shape of it. That is not stupidity on your part. That is deliberate cruelty on hers. There's a difference, and I need you to know the difference." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. "I thought she was it. I thought, after Dad." He stopped. "I thought I'd finally found something real again." "You will," I said, and I meant it completely. "Not today, not for a while, but you will." He didn't answer, but he didn't argue either. After a long time, he reached over and put his hand over mine. We sat in the dark while the lights burned around us, and Amos moved quietly through the house behind us, beginning the long work of clearing up, and neither of us said anything else. Sometimes that's what love looks like. Just sitting in the wreckage together, without flinching. 3 months later, Grant sits across from me at Percy's old desk on Tuesday mornings for our weekly business review. He looks better. Not healed. I'm not sure that's the right word for what happens to a person after something like this. But clearer, like a window that's been properly cleaned. He started seeing a therapist in October. He brought it up himself, and I was quietly proud of him for that, in the way you're proud of your children when they do difficult things without being asked. Amos is officially retired, technically. He still shows up 4 days a week because, as he puts it, he doesn't know what else to do with himself on Tuesdays. Last month, Grant started calling him Uncle Amos. Amos pretended this didn't affect him. He failed completely at that pretense, and we both let him. Troy and Lucy live in a smaller place on the east side of town now. Troy found steady work. Lucy is thriving in preschool, by all accounts. I helped with their legal costs because Troy was, in his own frightened and compromised way, trying to protect his daughter. And Lucy is innocent in all of this. So purely, heartbreakingly innocent. Paige is serving 4 years for fraud and bigamy. I don't wish her ill. I do not regret what I did. Grant asked me once, a few weeks after that night, why I hadn't told him sooner, why I'd waited until the party, until 30 people were sitting in our dining room. I told him the truth. Because you would have defended her. You would have believed her version over mine. I don't blame you for that. That's what love does to a person. I needed you to see it yourself, even if seeing it hurt. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You were willing to let me be angry at you." I was willing to let you be angry at me for the rest of my life, if it meant you weren't building your future on a lie. He didn't say anything else that day. But that evening he showed up, unannounced, with a box of pastries from the bakery Percy and I used to go to on Sunday mornings. And we sat at the kitchen table and talked about nothing important for 2 hours, and when he left he held on in the hug at the door for a long time. That was enough. Percy used to say the right thing is rarely the comfortable thing. He was right about that, and about a great many things, and I still miss him the way you miss a landmark. The way you keep looking up expecting to see it, and the looking up never stops. But I am here, my son is healing, and the life he will build someday, the real one, built on real ground, I will be here to see it. That is what I held on to on that second-floor hallway on Keswick Street, watching a little girl in pajamas run to her mother. That is what got me back into Amos's truck and back to my house and back to my feet in that dining room. Not revenge, not even justice, exactly. Just love, the stubborn, inconvenient kind that doesn't know how to stop. The kind that is willing to break something today to keep it from being broken permanently tomorrow. If this story spoke to something in you, I want to hear from you. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Share this with someone who needs it today. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And tell me about a time you had to do the hard thing for someone you love. Your story matters too. Proverbs 27:6 says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy." I have turned that verse over in my mind many times since that night. Paige's kisses and the wound I gave my son by standing up in that dining room. And I know, without any doubt at all, which of those two things was the act of love. Trust what you know. Say what needs saying. The people worth keeping will find their way back to you when the smoke clears. They always do.